Yeah, so, after, our little rendezvous, the little, threesome we had, which was me, London, and Magnificent, me and London got serious, you know what I mean? And we started seriously dating exclusively, you know what I mean? You know, 'cause what was crazy, she was close to Dallas. She lived like 20 minutes away, you know what I mean? You know what I mean, close to Dallas, but she didn't want to tell me because she wanted to keep, it a surprise till we got up, together in Vegas. So once we started dating and I knew she was 20 minutes away, we started seeing each other more. You know what I mean? I go over to her house, spend a night, you know what I mean? Or stay a couple days or weekends. She'd come over to my spot, spend a couple days on weekends. Now, there's one particular, I guess you could say weekend, things got a little crazy. And what was going on around this time was that, Brandon, you know what I mean? Brandon, aka the captain, ADX baby father, was living with me. You know what I mean? Because, not only ADA kicked him out, like I said prior, ADA kicked him out, and his grandmother wound up selling the house. So he had nowhere to go, you know what I mean? Him and Callie was doing bad, you know what I mean? He was at the bus stop and shit. So being that Brandon started working for me, I told Brandon, you come crash at my spot, you come live with me at my condo. You know what I mean? So Brandon was living with me because he was working for me and shit. And, he became like family, you know what I mean? Somebody I could trust, he's like a little brother. So Brandon's living with me, you know. Things are going good between me and London and shit, you know what I mean? I would, like I said, I would go see her spend weekends. And she would come see me, but Brandon would have to be on his best behavior. Even though she didn't like, how Brandon, was messy and she had to clean up after him and all this shit. You know what I'm saying? But other than that, things were cool, you know what I mean? London would come over and we'd be chilling, you know what I mean? Having, romantic time, you know what I mean? Watching a movie, and then next thing you know, music would be blasting and you'll hear what you're talking about, all that shit. And I have to go in there and tell him keep it down and shit. And I even wanted to put London to the test. Like sometimes I would, 'cause I have cameras in the crib. So I would step out and I tell Brandon like, yo, try to, try to like see if London will fall for the bait. Like I would tell him like, yo, try to walk around with no shirt, see if she'd fall for the bait. She never fell for the bait, you know what I mean? She even told me like, yo, this nigga, cool. That's when I knew I could trust her, and that's when I knew I could trust him, you know what I mean? So it was no, big deal for us that, 'cause I told him to do that. So anyway, yeah, so we was planning to, do something special for each other. You know what I mean? On Valentine's Day, me and London, you know what I mean? We was planning on doing something special, We was gonna buy each other gifts, but we couldn't tell each other what the gifts were, you know what I mean? So the whole time, we planning, for Valentine's Day, we doing our thing, Like I said, London would stay with me, you know what I mean? And like, we would always get it in the morning before she go to work, you know what I mean? So a lot of times twice, 'cause, we'd get it in first thing in the morning, then she'd get dressed, even with the scrubs on, that ass was just like, boom, you know what I mean? And I wound up grabbing her, pulling her back in, and, we'd be making love again, you know what I mean? So that was the routine every morning. We get it in twice, you know what I mean? So anyway, like I said, me and her was planning to do something special for each other on Valentine's Day, you know what I mean? So, she said she bought my gift already. I had to go buy her gift. And we was gonna go to another spot. We wasn't gonna stay at my condo because, we wanted privacy because Brandon was already there. So, alright, cool. Plus, being that, London knew Magnificent, I knew Magnificent, you know what I mean? And Magnificent, is a realtor. She can get us a spot. So Magnificent found us a spot for Valentine's Day weekend for us to stay at, you know what I mean? Big ass, house, private. So that way Brandon can have the condo to himself. So anyway, so we planning for this Valentine's Day weekend, you know what I mean? And, London said she already went and bought my gift for me. So I had to go buy her gift, you know what I mean? Of course it was a surprise, I didn't want to tell her. So, I told Brandon, I'm like, yo, I was like, me and London is planning something for Valentine's Day. We not gonna be here for like a whole weekend, cause Valentine's Day fell on a Friday, you know what I mean? It was, it fell on a Friday, so that means Friday, Saturday, Sunday, me and London was gonna be, gone, so that way Brandon can have the house to itself. So he got hype. He's like, yo, yo, yo. He was like, yo, can I have some company? Yo, I met this bad bitch online, you know what I mean, on Instagram, this bad model bitch named Sydney. I met this bad model bitch. So I thought about it. I reluctantly, I said, yeah. I was like, and he got hyped. He was like, yeah, yeah. He was like, yo, this bitch bad, yo. He was like, yo, I met on Instagram. She a fine motherfucker. She got a fat ass, you know what I mean? Bad bitch, you know what I mean? And he was talking about her. He said her name was Sydney, but I ain't really paying no mind because I'm thinking about, damn, this nigga might trash my house. But then I'm like, nah, Brandon's been cool. Not only he's been working for me, and, and I could trust him. I got cameras in the house, so if he get crazy, I could, see what's going on. So I told Brandon, I'm like, yo, roll with me. We gotta look for a gift for London, you know what I mean? So, me and him hop in the whip. 88, no, not 88, Magnificent was in town, so I hit a Magnificent. I'm like, yo, I'm with Brandon, but, I want a female's opinion. I want to buy something for London, especially for Valentine's Day. Can you roll with me and Brandon? She's like, oh, God, because, Magnificent don't like Brandon. But she said, only for me and for London she do it, so me and, I told Brandon, get in the back seat, let Magnificent get in the front, when I pulled up to where Mag was at. So Brandon gets in the back. Of course, he's trying to holler at Magnificent, but she ain't trying to hear it, you know what I mean? He doing annoying shit like, rapping loud, playing the music and doing that, what you talking about, all that shit, right? So finally, we pull up to this Jerry spot, you know what I mean, where all the rappers go in Dallas, right? So we know the Jerry's real in there, so we go in there, we looking around, so I'm like, damn, I don't know what to get her, you know what I mean? I don't know if I want to get her a bracelet, a ring, or a necklace. So Magnificent looking around, she was like, yo, maybe you should get a necklace. She was like, cause you don't want to get a ring because y'all not getting engaged or married yet. Y'all still in the dating phase and, she was like, how about like a nice necklace, like a nice, Tiffany's necklace or, something nice, you know what I mean? So we looking through the necklaces and shit. Brandon, he's looking around, fronting, trying on watches, knowing he ain't got no money for no watches and shit, right? So anyway, so we looking through the necklaces. Magnificent's like, ooh, this is the one. She was like, Tony, this is the one. So I look at the necklace. I looked at the price. I'm like, damn, the price was, ooh, that price was expensive. So I'm like, fuck. She was like, yo, she was like, yo, you gotta go all out. You know what I mean? Like, if you wanna impress her, you gotta go all out. You gotta spend money. So I'm like, fuck it. Pulled out the credit card. Bought the necklace and shit. So me, Brandon, Magnificent, we leave in the jewelry store. We get back in the car. Now Brandon was hyped because he got a text from the girl that supposed to come see him. And he like, yeah, he's hyped. He was like, yo, Tony, I'm telling you. He was like, this bitch is bad. She got a fat ass. You mad pretty. You know what I mean? Real cute chick. You know what I mean? That you met on Instagram. He was like, she bad. She, he was like, mad rappers, be trying to get at her because, he said on her Instagram, she got pictures with rappers and shit, so he was like, trust me, this bitch is lit. Now he's talking about her, but like, again, I'm not really paying it no mind. And, Magnificent not really paying it no mind, so I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's what's up. So we drop Magnificent off. Me and Brandon go back to the condo. So I pull the necklace out again to show Brandon. I'm like, yo, this shit is high. He like, yeah, that shit is fire. He was like, she gonna love that because the diamonds was glistening. So I'm like, alright. So I put the necklace back in the box, and I sat it, you know what I mean, on the dresser in the bedroom, you know what I mean. So like I said, I trust Brandon. He's not gonna do nothing, you know what I mean. So it's getting closer to Valentine's Day weekend. So now, me and London is, we planning, so we getting ready. So, I didn't want to bring her gift with me. I was going to surprise her back when we go back to the spot that me and her, was written for Magnificent, you know what I mean? So, I told Brandon, yo, I'm going to leave a necklace here, and then I'm going to come back, you know what I mean? Because, like I said, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I said Friday, you know, I'm going to go, with London. We're going to spend time together. I'll come get the necklace the next day on Saturday, you know what I mean? Cool. So, like I said, I trust Brandon, he said he's gonna have company over with the girl. Alright, cool. So I said, yo, don't trash. I said, don't trash my house. I said, don't have no wild parties. You say you're gonna have one girl come over. Cool, leave it at one person. He like, yeah. He was like, I got you. He said, I got you, big bro. I said, alright, cool. Plus, like I said, I could see everything he doing on my phone because I got cameras in the crib. So cool, I leave. Me and London get up. Boom, it's Friday night. You know what I mean? We both get dressed, you know what I mean? We step out, we go to a restaurant. So I'm looking at my phone the whole time. I could see Brandon, getting ready, for the girl to come over and shit. You know what I mean? The nigga dancing around the crib, you know what I mean? Getting ready, cause he got this bad bitch coming over. So every so often I would look at my phone and just shake my head like whatever. So I'm chilling with London. We at the dinner table, you know what I mean? Holding hands, looking into each other's eyes, enjoying each other's company. But ever so often I kept looking at my phone to make sure. And she's like, you gonna look at that phone all night or, I'm like, nah, And she was like, I was like, nah, I'm just making sure Brandon good. She was like, he a grown man, he good. I'm like, yeah. So we talking and shit, you know what I mean? Sipping, you know what I mean? Well, I'm not sipping with champagne, she is. I'm sipping like juice or whatever in a champagne glass though. Still looking at my phone ever so often. So, when I look at my phone, another time I see the girl came through, but I didn't see her face. Because every time I would look at the phone, she was at an angle where I couldn't see her face, the girl. So I'm like, okay, no problem. So like say me and London be talking, and then I look at my phone, the girl would be walking in, but I see the back of her head. Alright, cool. So me and London be talking again. Next time I look at my phone, the girl would be probably like sitting on Brandon's lap or facing him. You know what I mean? To where I only see the back of her head, and he's kissing her on the neck, and And the next time I look at my phone, she's laying on her stomach with her face turned to the side where I can't see, and he's massaging her ass and shit. You know what I mean? Because she got on, the thong and shit. And then, I know, she was walking around the house, with this thong on and bra, but I like I said, I never saw the face because every time I would look at my phone, she's at an angle where I couldn't see. So then anyway, I'm talking to London, and she's like, yo, so I got a gift for you, things been going good with us, so whatever. So she pulled out this jewelry box, handed to me. When I opened it, it was a Rolex, yo. I'm like, wow. Rolex, classic Rolex, you know what I mean, with the matching pinky ring. I'm like, damn, she really went out, you know what I mean? She really went and bought a nigga, So I'm looking at the watch and the pinky ring. And she was like, where's my gift? I said, you're gonna get your gift when we go back to the thing. So I looked at my phone. I noticed Brandon and the girl walking out the bedroom or whatever. And I guess he was fronting because he got the jewelry box. And I'm like, what the fuck? He got the jewelry box or whatever. And he, I guess showed her the necklace. And the girl was like, oh. But I didn't see the face. So she's like, oh, so she put the necklace on. So she put and I'm like, I'm looking at my phone. That's when London snatched the phone and cut it off, right? I'm like, she was like, no. She was like, yo, you here with me or you with him? And I'm like, oh, in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, shit. So I, the whole time I'm thinking about what the fuck are they doing with that necklace, him and that girl. I couldn't really react, you know what I mean? Because I had to keep a straight face for London, so I'm like, alright, cool. So me and London, we chilling. I'm admiring the ring and the watch, but I'm thinking about her gift. I'm like, damn, that fucking bitch got. But I'm thinking, nah, she probably just want to see, try it on or whatever. So, me and London, we go back, to the spot where we written the spot where Magnificent, you know what I breakfast or whatever. So, nice little spot. So we get to the spot, right? So we get back to the spot. Whole time London is excited about her gift. So I'm like, well, I left the gift back at the crib because, I wanted to surprise you the next day. So she like, alright. So I'm trying to, get my phone back. She like, She slow. She tossed that to the side and then started kissing on me. And then boom, we got it popping. Boom, we getting it popping, getting it popping, getting it popping. So I'm like, she was like, you can get my gift tomorrow. Right now, it's about us. Boom, so we made love for the whole night. Boom. So now it's time for me to get back to the crib, to get London's gift. So I get dressed. I said, I'll be back. You know what I'm saying? I'll be back. So she like, alright, don't take too long, cause, cool. So now, mind you, when I left, it was probably like, maybe 10 a.m., you know what I mean? So it's still daylight when I left. I get to the crib. Brandon, I pop up. I'm like, yo, what's up? I'm like, what's going on? Like, I see the girl had on the net. What the fuck? Like, what? He just had this shocked look on his face, like this nervous look. And he's like, yo, big bro, I'm like, what? I'm like, wait, where's the net? So I went in the room. The jury boss did with that. I'm like, yo, where the fuck is the necklace? He was like, yo, just calm down. I'm like, what the fuck you mean calm down? I'm like, yo, Brandon, where is the net? Did that bitch leave with the net? He said, yo, just let me explain. So I'm flaming hot that right. I'm like, yo, my nigga, like, I'm like, alright, explain. So he like, yeah, then when the girl Sydney I told you about, he was like, she came to see me. I'm like, yeah, get to the point. He like, she came to see me. We was chilling, you know what I mean? He was like, I told her this was my spot. I was like, okay, so you was front, like, this is your spot. I'm like, okay, but that got to do with the necklace, though. She was like, nah, you like, let me explain. So he said that, they was chilling, kissing and hugging on each other, feeling on each other. And then, when she wanted to go in the bedroom, because she was like, let's go where it's comfortable, let's go in the bedroom. So when she went in the bedroom, she saw the jury box on the dresser. Because I ain't never put it in no way. I just sat it on the dresser because, like I said, I trust Brandon. So she wanted to try it on. So he figured, he let her try it on. So she tried it on, he said. And then, she was a hype dancing with the jury on because, it was a nice piece of jewelry. He said he started feeling and kissing on her. When he reached in her panties, he said he felt something. I'm like, what? He said, yeah. He was like, remember that girl Sydney I told you about that be with the rappers? And I'm like, wait a minute. I said, hold on, because now my head is clear. Because before when he was telling you about this girl Sydney, I wasn't really thinking. But now when he say he reached in her panties, I said, she be with all the rappers. Her name is Sydney. I said, no. I said, Sydney Star. That nigga put his head down. I said, oh, I started laughing. I said, no. I said, Sydney Star. I was like, he was like, yo. He's like, big bro, please don't tell nobody. I just said, I kept busting out laughing. I couldn't stop laughing. I said, what? I said, listen. I said, fuck all that right now. We gotta get that fucking necklace back. You know what I'm saying? And he was like that. He was like so in shock, that Sydney wasn't what he thought it was. He just rushed, the Sydney person out the door. And then forgot to take the necklace. I said, yo, we gotta go get that motherfucking necklace. I said, London is back at the other spot waiting for me. I was like, we gotta go I said, where this motherfucker at? He was like, well, he was like, I don't know. Like, he was like, he never had no Sydney address. He had a cell number. So I said, fuck it. I said, what's the Instagram? So I go up to Sydney Star's Instagram. I look, I see that Sydney got an appearance somewhere in Dallas at a club, you know what I mean? One of the rainbow spots. Oh boy. So I'm like, yo, we gotta go to this, but the appearance wasn't till late tonight, so I'm like, fuck, how the fuck we gonna how we supposed to stall until then? I was like, I can't go. So I call up London, I'm like, yo, something came up. I gotta take, she was kinda like pissed, like, I'm like, yeah, something came up. So I lied and said that ADX Pops wanted me to do something for him. You know what I mean? She know, like, Farrago's like, the nigga I work for. So boom. So now me and Brandon is on stakeout and lookout for Sydney Star. So it comes nighttime. So I sent Brandon's ass to the door to ask the bouncer or the club, whoever was outside the door, the Rainbow Club or whatever, to ask when Sydney Star was gonna be there. And they was like, yeah, Sydney should be pulling up like in another hour or so. So fuck. So now we gotta wait. So we sitting in the car waiting, right? So somehow we see Sydney go in, Sydney Star, but they rushed Sydney Star in. So I'm like, yo, we gotta go in there. And I'm like, fuck. So, I pulled up my mask. They would have to see me. I pulled up my mask. And I went in. So I went in, me and Brandon went towards the door. So we like, yo, how much is to get in or whatever? I was like, cause we wanted to get in. I was like, we gotta see Sydney. Sydney Star, they was like, all right, well, they was like, they wanted us to pay, but somehow one of the women, with quotes, the woman was flirting with Brandon, and I said, nigga, you better do what you gotta do to get us in here. So he started flirting back, you could tell he was, wasn't feeling it, but he was flirting back. So boom, we get in the club. So we looking for Sydney. We like, yo, where's Sydney at? Where's Sydney at? And they pointed to the dressing room door. So I'm like, yo, I was like, we looking, we knock on the door, cause first the bouncer wasn't gonna let us get past, but then when he said that he knew Sydney, and the person was like, all right, cool. He moved out the way. He knocked on the door. Sydney says, come in. Nope, Sydney was in the dressing room, so we both walk in. And Sydney was like, oh, and still had the nerve to still have the fucking necklace on. And she was like, I figure you'd be looking for me. And she like holding the necklace, like playing like, oh, I knew you. So Brandon's like, yo, he was like, I'm sorry that, but you never told me. She was like, how you don't know who I am? Like, you didn't read my bio on my Instagram and all. So I'm like, yo, fuck all that. I cut him off. I'm like, yo, I said, excuse me, but I need that necklace back. That necklace from my girl. And he was like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, I need that necklace back. That's from my girl. You know what I mean? She's waiting for me. I was like, I don't know what type of misunderstanding y'all had, but you gotta get that necklace back. So Sydney stands up, trying to look all sexy and cute with the necklace. So she like, well, I might give it back and I might not. So now I'm flaming. I'm like, what you doing? She was like, well, being that he wouldn't do nothing for me, maybe you would do something for me. I'm like, what? So I'm like, so I just laughed. I'm like, yeah. So when Cindy got closer, I said, so you gonna give me that chain back? Said, depends what you do for me. I said, yeah. Pulled out my gun and cocked it. Pointed it right at his motherfucking crotch. I said, yo, give up the motherfucking jewels or lose the ones between your fucking legs, nigga. And Brandon his mouth just dropped. And then Sydney, her eyes got big and her mouth dropped. So I'm like, yeah. So I looked over at Brandon. I'm like, yo, get the fucking necklace, nigga. So I'm holding the gun to Sydney's crotch. Brandon take the necklace off. And I pull the gun back. And I said, yo, I was like, my bad. I ain't want to do this, but, my girl waited for me. So, I apologize, ma'am. Sir, she, he, they, them. I was like, I don't know what your pronouns is, but, I was like, but we gotta go. So me and Brandon, we walked the fuck up out of there. We get back in the car, I'm laughing my ass off. And Brandon like, yo, man. He was like, man, come on. He was like, man, come on. I was like, yo, we gotta go back to the crib and you gotta explain all this shit to London because she's not gonna believe me. She's gonna kill me if I come back this time. You know what I mean? So he had no choice. So when we get back, London's mad as a motherfucker. She walking back and forth. She's like, how the fuck? She was like, you left here at 10 a.m. It's now motherfucking after 12 midnight and, she's pissed. I'm like, nah. I'm like, yo, I was like, first of all, he got something to tell you. So then, once Brandon explained how, he met up with Sydney and didn't know, about, what Sydney was and how got the necklace and how we had to go get it back. London bust out laughing, my nigga. She just bust out laughing. And she was like, wow. And then, but that was just a crazy, crazy weekend. And then, I sent Brandon back to the condo and, me and London, kicked it for the rest of the weekend. And, let's just say, we was trying to make a baby, but we wasn't making a baby, you know what I mean?